Welcome to the podcast of All Means All. In this episode, Julia Schlam Salman, Mridula Muralidharan, Jabr Dajani, and Pamela February will talk about teaching and learning during crisis and unrest, strategies for sustaining education for all.
My name is Julia Schlam Salman, and I'm a teacher, educator, and a teacher interested in education and learners in times of crisis and in situations of ongoing unrest. So thank you very much for being here today to talk with me about this topic. I would like to open by asking, turning to Sarah and asking if you can describe the crisis that you're most familiar with and the situation. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation, Julia, and for the whole group. I've been working in the context of COVID crisis, so pandemic. And at the very beginning, this was also the topic of my PhD work. That's why I got used to work on it and knowing more and more. But as you can imagine, at the very beginning, it was not my topic of interest of the PhD. It was emergent, and the emergent, it was an emergent design of the research about an emergency situation. So everything was evolving, and at the very, as in every type of emergency, at the very beginning, nobody knows what is happening. And it was like that from my perspective, in Italy, they were closing schools and all the public buildings at the end of February and the beginning of March. And then we were locked down, and anybody was able to know how to deal with this emergency, especially the teachers, the children, and the situation was really confusing. And what especially was important to understand at the very beginning, it was which were the needs of the children at that time, and how, as a researcher, I could have a good impact on the situation and give my help in dealing with this.
Okay, thank you very much. Gunnar, will you share with us your situation?
Of course, thank you again. So we were on the 6th of February on 2023, we have experienced a huge catastrophe in Turkey, in the southeastern part of Turkey and northern Syria. And I am an educator in Turkey, and we found ourselves in the middle of this crisis where we didn't know how many people we have lost. The education completely stopped in the region. Schools were closed. We couldn't access the teachers that we are working with inside our community. So it was a pretty shocking and sudden emergence for our organization. The numbers are a little bit blurred, but as far as we know, there were like around 50,000 individuals lost their lives during these earthquakes. There was two of them, huge ones, and there were a series of little shorter ones. So it took a process of destruction, basically. And during this time, we have, as I said, we have lost a lot of individuals, and a lot of people were actually in need of basic, necessities. For example, access to clear water and access to food and nourishment. A lot of buildings were destroyed, demolished, especially in Hatay, Antakya. The city center was completely destroyed, and some regions were not accessible to the public and via the roads, so because the roads were disrupted as well. So the humanitarian aids couldn't go there. A lot of rescue missions couldn't be organized in some regions. So in the first week, of course, this is the most critical time of the rescue response, earthquake response. So we have lost a lot of people that way as well. This was pretty for the region. There are, of course, a lot of rural population there as well. So we lost contact of those regions and the schools there as well, because the roads were, as I said, disrupted. So teachers found themselves in this zone where they were actually they were also the victims of the catastrophe as well, but they were trying to help each other, and they were trying to survive basically, and try to help one another. And after this this critical time where we both as an organization called Teachers Network and both as educators supported the region through basic necessities, the educators in our community realized that let's start changing our hats, and now we should turn back to being educators and try to focus more on teachers, teenagers, and also, of course, adults and other humans in the region, and try to support them psychologically and socially. So that was our case.
Baran, I would turn to you now. If you can describe a little bit your situation and circumstances.
Yeah, sure. So it's a little bit different than Sarah's and Gunalp's situation. It's an ongoing situation, I would call it. So I'm from Iran, and as a country in the Middle East, we have so many social unrest situations in the region. So we are always in contact with so many news, with so many situations, circumstances that require care for our children. So I would mainly focus on the whole picture of the situation.
So if I can ask a follow-up question, could you describe a little bit how education in school functions within this situation and circumstance?
Sure, yeah. So we really try to incorporate the holistic approach in these kind of situations where the psychological care, psychological need is also important as much as the education is important. So as much as the information is necessary for our students to know about the situation, we also need to know how they feel about it, how they are reacting to it. So it's more like a holistic approach way.
Thank you. I would turn again to Gunap, because you started to talk about it, and if you can talk also a little bit about how within that crisis you all dealt with the functioning of education. How did it function, if at all?
So it took us a while to open up the schools again in the region, and because there was huge infrastructural damage done to the cities and the school network. So what we tried to do in that time of crisis were to bring individuals and connect them together. So what we did was, and in the educators and the educators and teachers we work in the region, we kind of formed, first of all, we kind of formed one community where we battled disinformation being being thrown in the communication networks. We did this project on digital literacy, critical digital literacy, and with that project group, teachers, we started to analyze the messages, the WhatsApp groups. We tried to find all the message, and we kind of through that group, we fact-checked every information that were coming to our communication environment, basically. So we kind of tried to clear first the information. We also tried to supply the basic needs, as I said, like in our community, our stakeholders as an organization. We try to bring people together, connect them to each other. And after that, after this critical process, critical time, we started to discuss with educators that what can be done with the students, learners, children, and also, of course, young people, adults, teenagers living in these conditions, because people were living in tent cities. They were living in tents, in containers, and so on. So we came together as groups, communities of practitioners, and tried to discuss what can be done. We created a series of activities for psychosocial support to be, implemented in the region. That can be implemented in, outside of the school settings. For example, tents, gardens, even in a ship that was located inside near the city. We organized a lot of workshops for children and young people there. And I have one great example I would like to share here. There was this one old woman attending one of the workshops. She claimed that she has this granddaughter of hers, and she said that I'm attending this workshop because I want to help her in whatever ways I can. So she joined us. She attended every meeting that was being implemented by our teachers. So, and after that, we found that she lost everyone in her life, actually, during the earthquake. And she didn't have a granddaughter, actually. I don't know if she had one before the earthquake, but she didn't have one back then. And we realized that she just needed that contact with another individual, with another person, basically. So this is very shocking, because I think the educators are the only ones in the society in times of crisis that can, detect a need like that, because other people were focusing on the basic needs, building infrastructure and so on. However, nobody was reaching out to these people, the students, of course, but as I said, young people and even the adults as well. So I think through that program that our teachers created, the community of practitioners inside that region created, I think we could reach out to a lot of people and try to help them make sense of this catastrophe and normalize the situation in some way.
Okay, thank you. You described mapping needs and identifying needs. And I wonder, Sarah, if you could talk a little bit about how you did that in Italy during the pandemic, which is something that transpired in many countries, but your individual experience there is very relevant here.
Thank you. Yeah, I also want to thank you, Gunalf, because I can see similarities in what we did. And just to start from the beginning, so we have to think again about that period, and it was really, really problematic. At the very beginning, nobody knows what was going on then, and we were just closed. There was no possibility to go back to school, have the materials. And the teachers were really struggling in solving and to reestablishing the normal course of education. The first thing that we did as a researcher, but in particular, I started to work together with a group of student teachers that were in the last years of the masters in primary education. They started to collecting needs from their colleagues, the teachers that they were in contact with, and they started to ask them how was the situation, because from outside it was impossible to understand, and we started to make interviews with teachers and the people we were in contact with. And the needs that we collected referred to them as professionals. And there was a huge workload on them, because yeah, there was a problem also from a technical side and point of view. There was a lack of knowledge, but also a lack of technical stuff and materials. Infrastructure. And they were struggling also keeping the contact with the kids, because from some families they didn't have the contacts before the COVID. And from the kids' side, the children's side, they were constantly saying that they really wanted to go back to school, not to be at school, but to be in contact, to be with their friends. So, and also from the parent side, I collected needs such as the hope that every children, every kids could have been in contact again with the class and with their teachers. And for a mother, it was very sad to see that, for example, not in every class it was possible, and for some teachers just disappeared. Not many, from my experience, but it was also possible to hear stories like that with no contacts. We really focus on the needs of contact and on the needs to retie together their relationships. And we build a project on it.
Can you also elaborate a little bit on your students' needs and how you respond? How do you identify them, and then how do you respond to them?
Yeah, sure. So it's very common in our context that we wake up with a news, with something that needs to be, talk about with our students. And we usually, when something happens, we usually sit down with our students and just ask them, how much do you know about the situation? We just want to make sure that you know what you know, and if we need to add something to it or just clarify something about it. So we don't want to hide issues from them, but also we don't want to give more information to them to scare them. It also happens with families. So we also sit down and talk to their parents and just ask them, how much do they know about the situation? Or do you want us to maybe elaborate more on it? Do you want us to clarify something that it's not easy for you to do it? So I think we act as like a supporter in this sense.
And just to connect what each of you have said, also as a source for de-escalation, for calming, for providing accurate information, and then calming the waters. So,
at the very beginning, can I add something to this? At the very beginning, I don't know if it happens also in your context, but we were hearing about families who didn't want to say to the kids that COVID was going on. Yeah. And then we started reflecting on this aspect and trying to talk to them and explicitly say that it's not about scaring kids, how you were saying before, but it's a matter of being accurate and to be sincere with the kids, because if you use the right communication, everything could be said.
And I relate to that. I actually, both in COVID and in earthquake process, families were not communicating very effectively with their children. So we realized that they may not be well equipped to do that as well. So I don't know, some were scaring the kids, for example, some were like hiding information from them. And I think that the only actors in the children's lives are that have this pedagogical perspective and equipped to handle such cases are teachers. So I think we play a critical role in times of crisis to help students make sense of these issues in a healthy and logical way.
That actually segues very nicely to the last topic that I wanted us to talk about. So we spent some time talking about the needs of the learners, and I would like you to elaborate some on also the needs of the teachers, and you talked now about the roles of the teachers. How can we, or what did you see that supports teachers so that they're able to enact those roles effectively? If you have some suggestions or recommendations for ways of supporting
I can
teachers.
start trying not to repeat what was already said, because I see many common elements in our experiences. From my experience, teachers were really lacking at the very beginning materials and also ideas on how to work in this situation. They were lacking knowledge and competencies also in dealing with technologies. The one that were able to have teacher training before COVID were much more equipped, and they were feeling much more competent in dealing with the problem. So this is always stressing the importance of professional development.
Professional development specifically around teaching during times of crisis?
No, in general, because in this case they were lacking competencies in dealing with technologies, but it could be everything else. And what we did it was to help them to look also on other types of needs that were the social emotional needs of the children, and to respond to them, how providing them examples of activities that could have been done with the children, for example, through arts, through realization of artifacts, and collect them together in their classroom. It was a help for them, because they were saying to us at the very end, it was so helpful that you gave us this insight, because we were just focused on how can we assess children in this period while we are all online, or which type of program software can be used, and we were losing the very important part that were the children, and listening to them and responding to that. Yeah.
Okay.
I think in our context, since it's a continuous situation, it's not a sudden or a crisis, like as you would also describe. There's no specific training that we could give to our teachers, so they would be equipped in these situations. But the only support that I can confidently say that we are constantly trying to provide to our teachers is mental health support. Yes, it's very important what they do to support the students and their families, but at the same time, they need support. They need to also talk about their feelings, how they feel, because they're also affected by the situation, of course. So, and also to give them saying that you're safe, also like you're okay. Like there are people, both to the teacher, family, and like everyone, like even the students, but you're safe. There are people who are trying to help you. There are people who are trying to protect you from everything that is happening. So yeah, mental health, I guess, is the...
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing actually. I think teacher well-being is the most important thing in this times of crisis. In our case, I know a lot of people who shared everything they have with the individuals there to the last brim. I mean, I know some people who couldn't sleep themselves, but were trying to help other people sleep, help students sleep. So I think we educators play a lot of different roles in times of crisis. So we have to be flexible and adapt to situations. So as a math teacher, I know, people would like to continue teaching math, but the times does not require that. You have to be more than that. You have to help individuals, help students, help learners. I think we cover much more area in the society than we were led to believe. And I think that in times of crisis, we can, make a very big, huge difference in the lives of children. However, while doing so, I have to say that teachers need to breathe a little bit, step back from the issues, think critically, relax, spend a little bit time on themselves, with their family, and I think that makes a huge difference.
I'm reminded of putting on your own oxygen mask before you put on someone else's.
Yes, exactly.
Is there anything else that you would like to add or share about your experiences?
I can add one more thing.
Yeah, please.
I want to mention the power of community in times of crisis. As a person who is working with communities of practitioners all the time, I see that individuals in solidarity can change anything, basically. As individuals, I know we have some power, but I think that as communities, while connecting with each other, forming interpersonal relationships, I think that makes a huge difference. I think that changes everything. I want to give one more example, if that's okay. There was this region in Turkey that the officials couldn't reach during the earthquake, even after 1 week. And during that time, nobody was actually providing support to that region in Antakya. So in our community, some individuals just found a car, gathered some basic needs, foods, clean water, and so on, and they somehow reached the area. I don't know how they managed to do that, but I know a lot of examples like this. Even officials, structures, institutions crumble in times of crisis. Individuals in solidarity can, save lives like this. So I think that forming relationships, engaging with communities, I think that is one of the most important things we can do as educators.
I would like to relate and to add a little piece on what Gunnar was saying that I completely share with you, also from the perspective and the importance of the community. Community could be also seen in a larger perspective and could be not only our community of professionals, but also looking farther than our institutions and trying to connect also other type of organizations, people. For example, in the project that we realized, for example, we asked the museums to host the works and the artifacts of the children in a way that at the very end of the pandemic they could be visible and represents and to be a memory on the territory, really living things that could be make visible and teach something, not only to the person living the situation, but also for the whole community, the larger community, and to the region, to the other schools, to the museums, to the university too. We learned a lot as university. And the other word that I will add is network.
Yeah. Perfect points. I don't think if I can add on anything, but I guess I would add talking about it, about everything that is happening, just open up and maybe it would help in some ways to resolve the issue for children, maybe because it's more about the uncertainty they have about the issue. And the more you talk about it with students, the more they can understand what's happening and what they need in future.
Thank you very much for your insights on this complex and not easy topic. And we can hope for calm and peace in the future. Thank you.
So we listened to our three guests sharing with us their three cases of crisis in different parts of the world. From what they shared, we can tell that a crisis is a significant and disruptive event that greatly impacts society, requiring immediate and effective response. It can take many forms, such as accidents, emergencies, natural disasters, or economic problems and political instability. Of course, they change daily life, as seen during COVID-19, as Sarah shared in her case from Italy, or during natural disasters like earthquake, as Gunlab talked about the 2023 earthquake that took place in Turkey. Sometimes it is for a prolonged time, as Bilan shared from Iran. And in any case, long-term issues or immediate events, they require attention and immediate response. Overall, crises disrupt the normal lives and the functions of normal life, and they demand swift solutions to manage consequences. Also, the different crises, as we listen to them, they vary in severity from minor and easily managed to severe and complex in scale, from local and limited to global and widespread. For example, the earthquake that Gonlap described is local, but it is large in severity when he mentioned around 50,000 people were killed. While the COVID-19 crisis, it was global and there was no one affected by it. Managing crisis is characterized by what we call VUCA in the literature. That is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous context, which demand a immediate shift from rigid predictions and expectations and control. Instead of trying to control the crisis, we should try to be with it and to try to foster competences that enable individuals and teachers to navigate the uncertainty and complexity effectively. So the idea of having a solution, prescribing solution, may reveal limitations because we can't predict or dictate the outcomes. We need instead to emphasize strategic and flexible approaches that allow for adaptation under uncertain circumstances. This requires recognizing context-specific nature of the crisis and the constraints of our knowledge system. We should stop looking for universal solutions for crisis. Instead, we hope to develop our knowledge, our flexibility, a repertoire of ways of intervention when a crisis hits at a local level or at a national level.
So we just heard from Dua giving us an explanation of the definition of crises, and as she explained, it's very complicated. But added to the definition, and as she ended by saying that it's not the same for all, so we cannot expect maybe a simple solution. And on top of that, in order to show how even education can play a role as we say, we think that education plays a role in promoting peace and positive influences, but we should also be aware that there are two sides that can happen in a crisis as far as education is concerned. We need to be aware. For example, education can also reinforce or exacerbate, make it worse, and prolong conflict and crisis. And for example, so let me start by explaining that. So one of the things that can happen is that it reinforces the dominant narrative, the ideology, the stereotypes that are out there, if it's allowed, and we should be aware of that. That can actually promote more conflict. So, for example, if one group or ideology is promoted, it can create strife and tension that can lead to more conflict. So in education in itself, if that happens, that we just need to be aware of that. Equally, it can also intensify the differences and widen the gap between those who have and those who don't. So this inequality. For example, in South Africa and Namibia during apartheid, the distribution of educational resources was not done equally. So you would have the so-called whites would get the majority of the resources. And then because they separated people, the so-called coloreds and the so-called blacks would get the least. And that was a clear way of intensifying the disparity, the inequality, and making sure that we create the seeds of doubt between how they classified people. So that is an example of where the education system, for example, because of that, even in addition to that, for example, white classes would have 18 children in a class, while black classes would have 39 children in the class. Also, the amount of teachers that were qualified for whites were more than in the range, and it is that scale that Dua was talking about. It's not just one, but across. And so we need to be aware of what is it that is happening. How is it that the ideology of what is happening in the country plays a role in prolonging this conflict. For example, the curriculum, what it says, if it's a polarizing curriculum, a curriculum that does not support everyone, that does not reflect everyone. For example, in the history syllabus in South Africa and Namibia at the time, there was the history that started when the first white man arrived. And so in 1652, Jan van Riebeeck landed in the Cape. So all children had to learn that, as if there were no people in Africa. And so part of what we have to do as teachers, for example, and we'll come to that, is to think about, do we just do that, or can we also say, well, there were people before, and these people were you, and so on. So we need to be aware. The fact that a lot of whatever's in need to look at the curriculum. Does the curriculum teach critical thinking skills, or does it promote rote learning? This is the thing. Just write it down in the exam. That's all we want, the whole list. But if the curriculum then, the idea of because if they don't have critical thinking skills, they cannot navigate. It's difficult to navigate negotiation because you have to think about this and think about that. But so our system can either support, reinforce what is this crisis, or it can support. So thinking in terms of support, for example, the curriculum should be there. It should be inclusive. It should foster tolerance of each other and understanding each other. I think if people understand each other, they tend to okay, I can see your point, but if they don't want to understand, if they're not tolerant, then that is not going to happen. So whether it's cross-cultural or cross-ethnic, cross so-called races, whatever it is, it is the fear of the other, the other, and if we can. And if we can understand what that others will see, for example, that we actually have there is social cohesion. So we need to practice social cohesion, the shared values that we have, the common goals that we have, the shared humanity that we have. And so those are more important things to emphasize, because all of this is about how do we promote this peace, and a better environment for the child to learn in. One of the other things is, for example, as I said, if we don't have critical thinking skills, so the opposite is then we need to promote critical thinking skills, problem solving, working collaboratively, talking about, we also need to teach learners conflict resolution skills, mediation, negotiation, dialogue. And it can start at very young, when Dirk hit me. Why did Dirk hit you? This, and discuss it with, and let them sort it out, kind of thing. Those are all these skills that we need to know, and it should be part of our curriculum. So as teachers, we need to be aware what is out there, and reflect on, is it hindering or is it helpful? And so therefore our practices should be mindful. We should think in terms of collaboration, communities of practice. And these are the things, for example, that Gunnar was also talking about. One of the things that he said, I mean, all of them spoke about that, but Gunnar was saying, as during this crisis, this earthquake in Turkey and the aftermath of it, where the government, and all the bodies could not go, or people, because they communicated with each other. There are people here that can do this and that can do that, but there's a person over there. Maybe they can't cross over here, but someone on the other side can help. So that idea, which of course means collaboration, which of course means practicing our communities, and we are better with more than just by ourselves. So and therefore the teacher, for example, needs to be aware of all these things. And Mridula will be telling us what is important for teachers to know and to be able to do, and how they practice.
Thanks, Pam. So just carrying forward as to what you were talking about, what is the role of the teacher in the times of crisis? And that is what we're going to be discussing now. So we realize that teachers are agents of social change, and their responsibility, especially during the times of crisis, extends beyond their traditional roles and the already expected roles. During the times of crisis, there's a heightened stress, there's anxiety, there's fears, and there's a lot of uncertainty as well. And it is then when we look at safety and well-being, and as teachers, we want to ensure these things for our learners, because a lot of them possess a lot of different social identities, which makes them at the receiving end of a lot of marginalization. And their safety, especially during these times, gets compromised even more. Now, as teachers, we understand that our classrooms are, embedded in the very fabric of the community, and they reflect the various diversity, as I was talking about. Physically and emotionally, classrooms are to be safe spaces and to ensure the security of our learners and safety. And we also need to maintain a certain sense of normalcy during these times and offer targeted supports. Now, how do we do this? Firstly, we also unpack what is the nature of the crisis And we do this very thoughtfully as well as respectfully. Now, this can be done through facilitating discussions and exploring the crisis at hand, encouraging critical thinking, as you said, Pamela, promoting empathy, the process, and also making sure that the learners are able to process this complex emotions and develop nuanced perspectives. And this also needs to be done in a very age-appropriate manner. Next, we look at extending learning that goes beyond the confines of schools. So that is about embracing the pedagogy of care, where, how we mold the school knowledge or the academic knowledge and how we link it to the real life events. So why is this important? This not only fosters a sense of purpose and engagement for the learners, and then they see the value of education in real life context as well. And that's where we are developing the life skills also. We acknowledge, it's very important to note this, and we acknowledge that there are diverse learning styles as well. And only when we acknowledge that and we learn to address it can meaningful engagement be possible. Teachers are role models, and they demonstrate a lot of empathy, resilience, acceptance, and flexibility as well. And only when they adopt these values can there be a sort of a reinforcement of positive coping mechanisms. And plus, we also encourage adaptive behaviors as well. I just would like to conclude and say that teachers play a very important role, and what we need to do is to ensure we are creating safe, inclusive classrooms, which has to be coupled with open communication and empathy, and only then can there be a certain sense of fostering a sense of belonging as well as mutual respect within these four walls. Thank you.
And in addition to this, we have heard 3 very powerful stories in our previous segment. But you are all student teachers. And so you may wonder, I'm sitting in Germany, or I'm in Italy. What does this have to do with me? But the idea, or in Ireland, or wherever in the world you are, but the idea that at one time or other, you will have a child, children with things that are going on in the world today. You will have children that you need to, learners that you need to assist. And so these are not specific practices only for when there is war, when there is apartheid over 50 years, but it can be used at any moment in time. And so we want to place the learner that is in your class for you to make sure that learner, doesn't matter what the learner is, where they come from, but at that time that they need you, that might be their crisis. And that crisis is then for you to see, how can I use these valuable information that was discussed today? How do I use them? And so there is a lot of things that we have not said, but please read our book chapter, and you will get this knowledge, and we hope that you will apply it.
Thank you, Pamela, for saying that. I would like to add to it that also we believe that teachers, educators are agents of change. So if you are lucky and part of the advantaged world, also it is important for you to raise your awareness and your students' awareness about what's going on in the other parts of the world. We believe that you and your students can make a difference and can enhance equity in other areas of the world.
And to end off, Dua is going to present us with, I'm getting gooseflesh, with a message from an educator.
So as Mridula said, and we heard from every other participant, that the teacher is the most important person or factor who can help students pass through the crisis. Unfortunately, not all crises are possible to navigate. I am a Palestinian from Jerusalem. I finished my PhD years ago from the Hebrew University, and I want to give the example of the crisis of the war of Gaza. Unfortunately, the tragic war exemplifies the concept that some crises are impossible to be solved due to the inherent complexity, deep-rooted causes and conflict, and far-reaching impacts. In this context, where tens of thousands of children have been killed, millions are misplaced, the priority is on survival need, having food, clean water, and shelter during the war. Safety concerns and displacement, lack of infrastructure, in simple words, the destroying and demolishing of schools, houses, mosques, and the ongoing psychological trauma further impede access to schooling and education. In the midst of darkness of war, I want to share a tragic incident where the loss of a teacher became a profound source of inspiration. I want to talk about Ra'fat El-Arir, a prominent Gaza professor of English language and literature. He was a writer, activist, and he was killed in an Israeli airstrike on December 7th, 2023, with his children and several family members. Last October, he had spoken to CNN in English about the difficult decision whether to flee or to stay in the Gaza city amid Israeli bombardment. He chose to remain, stating that he and his family has nowhere else to go. El-Arir, as a teacher, edited collections of Palestinian writings and co-founded an organization amplifying youth voices. His death sparked tributes from colleagues and students worldwide who remembered him as a generous educator and a champion of Palestinian literature. Ra'fat El-Arir's case exemplifies teachers' advocacy and agency through his effort to amplify Palestinian voices and experiences. As an educator, he describes Gazan life, edit collections of Palestinian writing, and engage with international media to advocate his community. His agency is evident in guiding writers and persistence in teaching, despite all the challenges. By shaping public discourse and fostering new literary voices and building global connections for Palestinian literature, he went beyond his traditional learning role. His actions show how educators can leverage their expertise to advocate for their cause, for their students, and for their community, while actively shaping their professional impact. Before he was killed, while anticipating the wars, he wrote a poem, a message of hope, as Pamela would like to say. If I must die, you must live, to tell my story, to sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings. Make it white with a long tail, so that a child somewhere in Gaza, while looking the heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad who left in a blaze, and bid no one farewell, not even to his flesh, not even to himself, sees the kite, my kite you made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment an angel is there, bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope. Let it be a tale. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the podcast of All Means All. In the show notes, there is a link to the chapter in the open textbook. There you can find the transcript of the video and more information on the topic.